60 FPS is still not a standard for some games these days on current gen hardware, mainly consoles. Now, I don't understand why that is still a thing. Surely these top-end consoles can still output 60 frames per second, maybe not 120 frames per second, but definitely should be able to do 60. Okay, with a fair bit of drops, fair enough. As long as the drops aren't that bad that it causes the game to be very unplayable at certain parts of the game, I don't really see a problem in that. However, I do think the standard of 60 FPS is kind of slowly going away. Now, we're 4 years into the life cycle of these consoles now. It's kind of understandable. As the years go on, these consoles are going to get weaker as graphic development gets more powerful, and these consoles will get significantly weaker. That's not a shame. That's just a fact. That's a 100% fact that these consoles, and then again, it's pretty obvious that, because as you play games and as you'll see over the certain console life cycle that these consoles do lose a fair bit of their power. They do lose that power because, well, they're old. The hardware is 4 years out of date in the Xbox Series X and the PS5. And by time, I don't know how long this console cycle will be, 7 or 8 years. They can't be hugely long. I mean, 7 or 8 years for a console is quite a lot. I mean, most phones, or quite a lot of phones these days, don't even get that long and supported updates. Well, they just are now, but they didn't before anyway. You couldn't get, so it's kind of crazy. That 7 or 8 years for a console is quite a fair amount. We got a few 2029 they're expecting a new console to be coming out. It's quite some time before then, good 4 or 5 years before we actually see a new console on the horizon again. Now, that's very understandable. Now, games are obviously going to lose a lot of their frame rate, over time. Now, we're only 4 years into the life cycle now. I kind of still expect games to be playing at 60 FPS. Okay, maybe the 120 FPS is kind of out the window for a lot, and I mean a lot of console games. I think very, very, very little games actually support 120 FPS, and the ones that do it pretty well. I think Call of Duty, some of the games, it's not a huge variety of games that support 120 FPS. I mean, still a large portion of games still support 120 FPS, so you're not out of the park with games that are actually going to support your monitor. Although just because you're playing 120 FPS or you are playing on 120 hertz on your monitor doesn't mean that it's the end of the world, and you can still very much easily enjoy it. Now, it's come out now that Avowed runs at 30 FPS on the Xbox Series X and S, confirms Obsidian. This is the IGN article we're going to read now. Avowed runs at 30 FPS, not 60, on the Xbox Series S and X. It's a first-person single-player game. You don't necessarily need 60 frames. Avowed will run at baseline of 30 frames per second across the Xbox Series X and S, developer Obsidian has confirmed. Speaking on the Iron Lords podcast, art director Matt Hansen says Obsidian is targeting a baseline of 30 FPS for the first-person fantasy RPG. 60 FPS sounds unlikely, however, even on the most powerful Xbox Series X. So why are we calling it powerful then? Why are we calling it powerful if it can't actually output 60 FPS? Now, I'm not saying it will be buttery smooth, and I'm not saying there won't be drops, but I'm sure they can actually minimize them drops. Consoles are supposed to have probably some of the best optimization out there. You're not creating for multiple different hardware types. If you were developing for PC, you're actually developing for multiple hardware types. You've got to try and develop and hope to God that what you're developing will actually work on a significant amount of PCs that people have. It's very hard to tell what is the average PC specs out there. I'm sure it's going to be like an Nvidia card, but it's a lot more easier to do it on a console. Because you've got a very select amount of consoles to do it on. It's only one console. They use, I'm pretty sure the PS5 Slim even uses exactly the same specs. The cooling might be different, but everything else is, I think the motherboard is a little bit smaller, but everything else is exactly the same specs, exactly the same. Everything is the same. It's just a significantly smaller than the slim version, than the normal version. Now, again, explaining, Hansen said Obsidian decided to go for 30 FPS in order to facilitate fancier visuals, and that because Avowed is a first-person single-player game. You don't necessarily need 60 FPS. Now, they're not exactly wrong. You don't need 60 FPS. You're not too wrong with that. You don't need to be rammed down with all these FPSs and stuff like that. However, I do really wish that, people would stop using this. You don't need 60 FPS. You don't need this. You don't need that. I'm not going to lie, if I buy something, I kind of want it to actually do well, Okay, yes, I'm not going to experience this and that. I'm not after experiencing the highest frame rate these consoles can offer. But I'm not going to lie, I would kind of love I would love it at 60 FPS. It would be kind of a cool little feature. I don't understand why you can't. Oh, we're sacrificing 30 frames. We're slicing your frames in half so we can add some good visuals. Oh, fuck the visuals. I don't understand why we sacrifice some nice visuals and so you can actually have a look. Okay, I want the game to be decent quality. I don't want it to be like the textures to be awful, of course not. However, I don't also want the game to run like a stuttery piece of shit. Now, Starfield. Now, I'm sure what a lot of these games are going to do. They're going to come out and do this. They're going to, we're doing a 60 FPS patch because of maybe the backlash they get from this. Starfield is a pretty big one. They recently, I just think, they've put out a 60 FPS patch completely on the S and X, the Series S and X, and from what I've played on it runs pretty smooth. It runs a lot better than it used to. 30 FPS, you could definitely notice it. It felt sluggish, especially in battles and stuff like that, and fights you were going against. It felt sluggish. I didn't like it. I didn't like the way it was. It definitely felt like something was pulling on you. The frame rate just felt jaggy. Now, I'm not like 30 FPS. I thought we were leaving that sort of FPS in generation. What is it? We're on generation 7. Would it be? Console generation 7. I think we're on generation 9 now. I thought we would have had an incredible leap. Now, obviously, graphical leap. There's been a fair bit of a graphical leap, but not as big as from the 360 or from the PS2 and the original Xbox to the 360 and the PS3. That was a pretty huge graphic leap. And then again, from the PS3 and the Xbox 360 to the Xbox One and PS4, that was a decent graphical leap. But obviously, graphical leaps down the line are going to get less and less noticeable, purely because these consoles can kind of keep up better than what they used to be able to. Like the RAM in the average console, I think the RAM in the 360 and the PS3 weren't even a gigabyte of RAM. So the specs that jumped from the PS3 and the Xbox 360, it was a significant jump. That was a huge jump. The specs, the RAM and everything from them consoles, that was a huge jump back then. And again, these consoles now, there was a huge jump then. You know, I think consoles these days, we have to sacrifice this for visuals and stuff. Now, I'm pretty sure they will put out a patch. They'll put out a patch to pretty much give you 60 FPS. I don't know why we're gatekeeping 60 FPS now. It's kind of weird to me anyway. Why on earth? Surely, if it can't... I know there are people who say there's limitations with the Xbox Series S. There are a lot of developers who have come out and complained and made complaints about the Series S, that it's a very weak console and it just can't keep up with many games. And to be quite honest with you, they're probably not wrong about that. It's a very weak console. Some devs have even wished that the console never existed, which is kind of crazy thing to say, but it's fair enough. Now, I don't know whether that's partially the problem. They just don't want to admit it for obvious sakes, but I don't know what the exact reason. If they're saying even for the Xbox Series X, so you're saying when arguably in most cases one of the most powerful consoles this generation, at the moment anyway, is, and a lot of developers say it's excellent developing for the Xbox Series X. You're telling me the Xbox Series X is lacking in power? Are you sure? Are you doing that? Are you sure you're okay with that? Or is it just you're blaming it on the Xbox Series S, sorry. You know, is it which one are you doing? Are we going to blame it on the Series X is slow and it can't keep up? Or is it just because the Series S is shit and people don't really want to admit it? I don't get it. I talked about this earlier this year. I can't remember what it was actually going to be 30 FPS. Redfall as well. That was 30 FPS. I think it's actually 60 FPS now. They put out a patch. Why are we not? And it's always Xbox games as well. I don't know why. Is there some? My thing is it's the fucking Series S. It's the Series S that's the problem, really. If it's just a thing really happening with Xbox, and it's like 3 games. This is 3 games. Redfall. I think there's another game as well, but Redfall. What was it again? Hellblade. I think that was 30 FPS as well. I don't know if you will actually get a 60 FPS patch for that. I presume not. But Redfall, I think, has a 60 FPS patch, and Starfield has a 60 FPS patch as well that they've just put out. To me, anyway, I don't know what the problem is, if it's just Xbox coming up. Now, obviously, I think this has happened to PlayStation. I think Suicide Squad only played at 30 FPS as well. The devs did blame part of that on the Series S. I don't know how well it ran on the PS5 and that, but again, this type of stuff to me is very annoying. You know, I get it. These consoles do get weak over time, and we're going to see these consoles get weaker as the years go on. So they're not going to be up to standards, and you know, game companies aren't going to be releasing the greatest games out there for them. Indeed, that's understandable, and that's something you kind of sacrifice when you are playing on a console, that one day that console will be very weak and won't be able to do a lot of the things it said on the box when you purchased it. That's obvious, and I think a lot of people, again, need to understand that. But this is the type of stuff I don't like. We're 4 years in, and we're starting the standard now, just now. We got to play this at 30 FPS. Like, can we move away from that at the moment? Give it at least another 2 years before we start saying, oh yeah, we need to scrap this, blah blah blah. Because I'm kind of annoyed at this type of stuff when I see it. Anyway, it's a first-person single-player game. You don't necessarily need 60 FPS. Now, not really. I can understand if this was Call of Duty and they decided to actually release it at 30 FPS. Yes, there would be a big uproar. And I mean, I'm not saying there isn't a big uproar because of it. Well, not a huge uproar. Now, will it affect and make the game make or break? Probably not. Again, if they're going to release it at 30 FPS, I'm sure it's playable. Again, Grand Theft Auto 6 is apparently going to be 30 FPS as well. So I'm assuming, hopefully, that will be actually even playable at 30 FPS. But the online mode, that would probably need to be 60 in some cases. Then again, on the last gen consoles, Actually, I don't think GTA Online actually was ever 60 FPS. Maybe it was for a few years, until they started piling loads of shit on the online and it just tanked the FPS. I know in some modes and some, like, online when you'd be playing and you'd be doing a lot and there'd be a lot of players in the lobby, it would lag like crazy. You'd drop to, 25, even maybe below 20 in some certain scenes. So it would be pretty brutal. And these were on the baseline consoles. I think even on the next gen upgrade, or the last gen's upgrades, they didn't run exactly great. Although I don't think they were designed to run at 60 FPS. I think they were just designed to run at 4K, which is not really surprising, to be honest with you. We're currently targeting 30 frames per second bare minimum, Hansen said. That's the expectation. That's a first-person single-player game. You don't necessarily need 60 FPS, and that allows us to get a lot more juicy VFX and lighting and all of that other stuff. Just give me back my other fucking 30 frames. It's a trade-off we opted to make relatively early, and we're really happy with it. The game running pretty smooth for now, visually dense it is, and that was always our goal. But Obsidian is still figuring out the nitty-gritty of performance. It's one of the last things you do, Hansen said. I really hope it doesn't break the game. Again, I don't want this to become only in rare cases if the game is really, really, really dense. Like GTA will probably be a very dense game. There'll be a lot going on, so I can understand why that may end up playing at 30 FPS. There is rumours again that if the PS5 Pro or the Xbox, whatever the next gen refresher is coming out, there are rumours again that apparently that it won't even run at 60 FPS on them. So this game must be really fucking heavy if that is true. That must be a really, really heavy game. GTA 6. And to be honest, I'm happy to play at 30 FPS if on certain games, but again, start saying, it's a single player game, you don't need 60 FPS, and it's not the end of the world, but it's just, I don't want this sort of stuff becoming the normal, unless it's like a game that really needs, especially I don't want it becoming the normal for multiplayer games. If you can't make a multiplayer game work at 60 FPS, then try and find another way around it, because a multiplayer game at 30 FPS is brutal, especially these days anyway. It's brutal. Adding, and now back in the day you could probably do it and get away with it because, well, everyone was that. But if you're adding crossplay and stuff like that to games, you're setting yourself up for failure on console. And I know that crossplay is a huge thing to most online games now, and I'm sure as the future goes on, it will probably continue to be that way for a lot of online games. Now, I do think that's a good thing. It gives more players the advantage, and it fills up the lobbies more evenly. But again, I don't want 30 FPS to ever interfere with online gaming, especially online shooters and FPS games, or any game that you any second matters. They're the games that I do think that 30 FPS should stay away from. Single player games, again, it's not the end of the world, but it's just a shame how it's going down like that, and I can understand anyone who is annoyed at stuff like that. We are in the 9th generation of consoles. If let's say if this was the 10th generation of consoles and they still are doing 30 FPS, I think we've got a lot more to ask of what are these developers actually doing, we're going to give you some good lighting. Now, yeah, lighting is pretty good in games, and it should be good. However, I don't know if it's sacrificing my frames that much. Again, I hope the thing is, there's a difference though. There's a janky 30 FPS and there's a smooth 30 FPS. Can you keep that 30 FPS capped? And even in intensive situations, that doesn't drop below 30 FPS, or doesn't drop below a significant, 28 FPS, something like that. If it starts to drop in like that, it's going to look pretty choppy. It's going to look very choppy, in fact. Again, I thought we would have left 30 FPS behind with this generation. Well, I could understand, again, towards the end of the generation life cycle, that's fair enough, but I don't understand, again, we're only 4 years in. We got probably another 3 or 4 years left of this life cycle. You know, I still don't understand why on earth 30 FPS has become such a popular thing, especially on the Xbox side. And again, it brings me back to that. I do think the Series S has a part to play in this. It must do, right? But again, if they're saying that it's even on the Series X, they're releasing on 30 FPS, it kind of makes me worry a little bit on where on earth this power is that they say the Series X has. Because again, they brag about it quite a lot, Xbox do, and a lot of journalists do. They brag, oh, the Xbox Series X, it's one of the most powerful consoles on the market right now. And then you look at it and you're like, well, I mean, it still can't run games at 60 FPS, and there are developers sacrificing things for better visuals. Or are they just using them excuses because the Series S is limiting that? Probably the Series S. It's a common thing now. Let's not blame it on the Series S because we don't want Microsoft getting mad at us. No, I don't know. I think this is an Xbox exclusive game for a little bit until it ends up shifting off to PS5, and I'm sure I'll end up playing better on PS5. Yeah, that's the thing. If the game plays better, if an exclusive that comes over plays better on PS5 and has higher frame rate, it's 100% something to do with Xbox. I again put the blame on the Series S, 100%. But again, I don't know. It's one of them things. You don't like seeing this sort of stuff. I would love for games to be 60 FPS. Stop coming up with some half-assed excuse. But that's how gaming is turning up now, isn't it? The standard is going to be 30 FPS.